All right, we ready? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dorval Carter, and I'm president of the Chicago Transit Authority. And it's a distinct pleasure to welcome the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, to the 95th Street Dan Ryan Terminal. It is also an honor to welcome Mayor Lori Lightfoot, Senator Tammy Duckworth, Senator Dick Durbin, as well as members of the Illinois Congressional Delegation and other elected officials and community leaders who are joining us here today. The station here at 95th Street is a jewel in the CTA crown. The original terminal was built during the Nixon administration, and the station was completely rebuilt and expanded in 2019. It is not only one of the busiest CTA rail stations, but also one of the busiest bus terminals, serving city and suburban buses, as well as the Greyhound bus system. The $280 million project, the largest station project in CTA history, would not have been possible without the more than $100 million in federal funding we received from the U.S. Department of Transportation. But this is more than just a rail station. It represents one of the largest investments in Chicago's far south side in decades. It created scores of jobs in an underserved community, and it provided unprecedented opportunities for small and local businesses. Perhaps most importantly, it will also serve as the gateway to the extension of the Red Line to 130th Street, a project that will bring fair and equitable transit access to the Chicago's far south side. The Red Line extension will remove decades-old barriers to opportunity and spur equitable economic development. Or to say differently, it will be a game changer for Chicago. Just a short time ago, I had the honor of speaking with the Secretary, the senators, and the others standing here with me about the historic nature of the Red Line project and how its benefits will resonate for decades. We also spoke about how federal funding is absolutely critical to CTA's ongoing modernization, including our all-stations accessibility program, which we refer to as ASAP, our plan to convert our bus fleet to an all-electric vehicles, and our efforts to pursue equitable, transit-oriented development, which Mayor Lightfoot began as a pilot earlier this summer, along with many other vital transit projects across the city. And let me be clear about this. Federal funding is the only way that CTA can continue to modernize a system that in some places is more than a century old. The only way we can continue to provide good-paying jobs to underserved communities and important business opportunities to small and minority-owned businesses. And the only way that we can reverse the disinvestment that has hampered the South Side for decades. I have always said that public transportation is more than just getting people from point A to point B. And an investment in transit benefits means much more than just to the people who take it. I want to once again thank you, Mr. Secretary, for making the CTA a part of your visit to Chicago, and also for your unwavering support of public transit. I also want to thank Senator Duckworth and Senator Durbin, as well as the rest of your colleagues in the Illinois delegation, for their never-ending and tireless advocacy for transit and for the CTA specifically. And at this time, it is my pleasure to welcome the Mayor of the City of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. Mayor?
Good afternoon, everybody. And Mr. Secretary, welcome to Chicago. Thank you to our partners in our federal delegation led by our senior Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Duckworth, and I also want to give a special note of thanks to the members of Congress who are here. We work in partnership together on behalf of the people of our city, our region, and our state. Anytime we've ever needed anything, our delegation is there, ready, willing, and able to roll up your sleeves and being proactive and asking us what more that we need as a city and as a region to make sure that our residents have the opportunities to thrive. So thank you very much, one and all. I want to thank our state partners. I want to thank the members of organized labor who are also here. We work in partnership with you. I don't need to tell you that this is a city that organized labor built. Strong, vibrant, and will continue to be so. So thank you very much for all of your work. Today we are here to discuss one of the most critical resources to our communities, and that's our city's transportation infrastructure. Investing in public transit infrastructure residents rely on every day provides us with an important opportunity to improve their quality of life, improve our regional and national climate, and create high-quality, well-paying jobs and reduce commuting times and costs. This is something I know Secretary Buttigieg knows very well, not only from his life experiences, but as a former mayor himself right here in the Midwest. And something I'm thrilled to see being uplifted in President Biden's Build Back Better agenda, which absolutely has to have bipartisan support. As more and more cities across the country begin to reopen and residents return to work and play, as well as continue to prioritize the reduction of car congestion downtown and combating climate change, it is crucial that we work together to provide residents with access to public transportation systems that are both efficient and reliable. And let me take this moment also to say a special thanks to President Carter. I want to remind all of you that through the pandemic, the Chicago Transit Authority was the only public transportation system that ran at full steam. And why? Because our workers and our residents needed us, and we were there for them. So thank you, President Carter, for your incredible leadership. Making sure that our transportation system is ready and accessible to our residents is an effort that we take very seriously here in Chicago. Public transit is essential and has been to us through the pandemic. Our city long has been known as a hub for transportation infrastructure of all kinds, and that's no mistake. We boast a number of competitive advantages that make our city the place to be for residents and businesses alike. We are the transportation and economic infrastructure epicenter for all of North America, makes no mistake about it. We are in close proximity to critical resources like fresh water, agricultural commodities, next-generation technologies, and human capital. Our surface transportation system, which includes more than 120 CTA bus transit routes, 145 CTA rail stations, Metro, Pace, and a major Amtrak hub, are all vital for our ability to keep this ecosystem running smoothly, making it all the more important that we constantly work to identify innovative and effective ways to maintain and invest in this system, because when we do that, we're investing in our residents, we're investing in our employees, and we're creating economic opportunity for so many people. The 95th Street station that we're in, which Secretary Buttigieg and other elected officials had the pleasure of touring earlier today, provides one such opportunity. While this major bus to rail transfer point, which was completely rebuilt in 2019, is the furthest south on our current L system, it does not equally serve all of our South Side communities, and we spent some time talking about just that and the opportunities that an extension would provide to the far South Side, stretching all the way to 130th Street and bringing into the city Altgeld Gardens, which I know is a big opportunity and interest of mine and others that are gathered here. That's why the CTA has long proposed an extension of the Red Line from this station to 130th Street, which would improve connectivity and access to the entire CTA network, expand economic opportunity through connections to jobs, educational opportunities, housing, and other services, further our commitment to creating sustainable transportation, and improve air quality, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and the list goes on and on. But the thing I want to say is this, and I share this with the Secretary, it takes partnership. We have to have federal resources, but I want to be clear that with those federal resources, the city of Chicago itself will also have skin in the game. We know how, when we invest in the right ways, when we put people first, when we're intentional about making sure that development and investment doesn't mean displacement, how we unlock the potential of our communities and our neighborhoods. So we will always be there. We will be the partnership that our residents deserve. And so, Secretary, we're going to keep lobbying and advocating, but trust that we will be doing the right things on behalf of our residents to make sure that those federal dollars have catalytic and transformative effect on our city. So with that, I want to say again how grateful I am for the Secretary to be here today, for really thinking about the city of Chicago and what assets we have and how we can be a model for other cities across the country. I look forward to working even closer with you and your administration to transform the lives of Americans. And so let me thank you once again. And with that, I'd invite Congressman Rush up to say a few words. Congressman. I'll take your place.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to thank President Carter, Mayor Lightfoot, Senators Durbin and Duckworth, and all of my colleagues from the House of Representatives. And most of all, I want to thank you, Secretary Buttigieg, for your visit. And I want to welcome you to the 1st Congressional District of Illinois. Mr. Secretary, as I said on our way from the conference room, I was so delighted and overjoyed when our President Biden, chose a Midwestern mayor to be the Secretary of Transportation, because that was a sign that he knew and that how important transportation is and was, and he knew that if he wanted to get transportation corrected, get infrastructure passed in our nation, then he had to rely on a Midwestern mayor to make it happen. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, I believe that this moment calls for bold investments in our nation's infrastructure. Investments that are sorely needed in the 1st District, in our state, and all across this nation. It is absolutely crystal clear to everyone that has an eye to see that decades of underinvestment have taken their toll on the quality of life in our communities, particularly those disadvantaged communities. You can look at the headlines in the daily press and see not just the numbers in terms of violence and homicide, but behind all those numbers is disinvestment, decades of disinvestment that have led to frustration among too many of America's citizens. Mr. Secretary, for far too long, I've seen able-bodied men and women from this community standing aside idly and watching others from across the Midwest area, including your home state, coming into Chicago, doing work on public work projects and not really receiving any of the economic benefits. And Mr. Secretary, I must declare that we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, that we're tired of getting all the delay associated with these public works projects, all the dust that's associated with these public works projects, and none of the dope. All the delay, all the dust, and none of the dope. Mr. Secretary, we have to bring all this to a screeching halt. You're probably aware, Mr. Secretary, that in Illinois there are 2,300 bridges and 6,200 miles of highways that are in poor condition throughout our state. Our state, our beloved state of Illinois, has a C- grade in its most recent infrastructure report card. Boy, it makes me think of my grade that I got in trigonometry in high school, a C- grade. Mr. Secretary, it's about time. And that's why recently I was proud to secure more than $36.6 billion to expand electric vehicle infrastructure in the recently passed Investment in America Act. And Mr. Secretary, that's why I, for one, along with others who are gathered here, certainly appreciate your vision and President Biden's vision. And I really, really, really want to take my hats off to you, because not only do I appreciate your vision, I appreciate your courageous boldness that you bring to the table and the boldness of President Biden. Again, welcome to the 1st District of Illinois.
Good afternoon. I'm Raja Krishnamurthy, and I just want to say Happy Infrastructure Week. Happy Infrastructure Friday. Finally we arrived. I want to say a special thank you to Secretary Buttigieg for visiting us. Of course, Mayor Lightfoot, President Carter, Senators Duckworth and Durbin, thank you so much, and all of my colleagues from the House, and of course the good men and women of the CTA and CFL. I just want to make 2 quick points. First of all, the American Jobs Plan is going to create millions of jobs. However, for people to take those millions of jobs, they need the skills to do so. And for them to have those skills, we need workforce development. I was the author of the Modernization of our nation's skills-based education system, which has helped to better educate 11 million people in career, technical, and vocational education. And the Biden administration and Secretary Buttigieg are proposing to invest $100 billion over the next 10 years in this skills-based and vocational education system. That is crucial, and I hope the Senate and the House both pass that request and invest money in the people of Chicago to take these jobs that are going to be created through the jobs plan. Thank you. Last point. CNBC actually just came out with a survey that awarded Illinois with top marks for infrastructure. In fact, it gave Illinois an A+ rating. My Asian American parents would be very proud of Illinois for that. However, the reason why we got top marks and an A+ rating is because of the A+ attitude of the city of Chicago, the CTA, the men and women who work here, the people at the CFL, and the cooperative attitude of the delegation working with the administration in helping to modernize our infrastructure. And to be honest, although we got that A+, I think there's work to do. And as someone from the suburbs, I know that we can't succeed unless the city of Chicago succeeds. We can't succeed unless the CTA succeeds. So I just want to say to all of you, the suburbs stand shoulder to shoulder with the city in getting the investment necessary to make the CTA and the city of Chicago the pinnacle of world-class infrastructure. So thank you so much. I'd like to now introduce our senior senator, Dick Durbin.
Please remain seated. Thank you very much. Mayor Lightfoot, it's great to be here. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you for coming today. You know, sometime this week there's going to be an important vote in the United States Senate. Senator Duckworth and I are going to be there. There's going to be a bipartisan infrastructure bill, $1 trillion. And you know that bill is going to spend more on transit projects than any bill has ever spent in the history of the United States. That bill is going to spend more money on railway than any time since the creation of Amtrak. That bill is going to repair more bridges than have been repaired since the Interstate Highway Project was created by President Eisenhower so many decades ago. It's an amazing bill. It's a bill that Joe Biden has endorsed and we have endorsed. I believe we can pass on a bipartisan basis, and I know Secretary Buttigieg has been involved in writing that bill. I would like to compare that infrastructure bill with the infrastructure bill of the previous administration, but I can't, because there was no infrastructure program in the previous administration. What we face now is a challenge of not only building the infrastructure for our future, but meeting Joe Biden's challenge of providing from our generation the resources so that we can build America back better. We have a lot of work before us, Mr. Secretary. You've been given an awesome assignment. We know you're up to it, and we want to be partners with you in making that assignment a success. My thanks to organized labor, who's represented here. My thanks to the contractors, Dorval Carter, and those who are working with the CTA. This is an amazing project. We are going to leave our imprint for the next generation. I'd like to call up my colleague, Senator Tammy Duckworth.
It's always rough following Dick Durbin to the podium. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. You know, I got to say, though, Mr. Secretary, you're not the first former presidential candidate who come through here. I came through here with Amy Klobuchar in December of 2019, but it shows the importance of this project. It's really great to see all of us here today, because all of us know how much an infrastructure package would improve the lives of so many Illinoisans. Projects like this one are a great example of the impact that federal funding can have on our communities. To me, this 95th Street Red Line project isn't just about improving our infrastructure, though. It would have been reason enough to give it green light just for improving the infrastructure. But to me, this project is about making sure that more Chicagoans can lead the lives that they deserve, by making it easier for folks across the South Side to get to work more easily throughout the city, by promoting greater access for those of us with disabilities. And let me just say that the ASAP plan that we're using here on the CTA in order to make the entire CTA completely ADA compliant and wheelchair accessible, as was proposed by Mr. Carter, is now in this next infrastructure package. The proposal is there. I'm hoping that it stays in and gets passed, but it's going to make all legacy transit system across the nation wheelchair accessible, and it's long past time for that. This project, as already been mentioned, is going to create more good-paying union jobs for local workers so that they can build the city back better, but also so that we can rebuild the middle class. Because we know America's fortunes, America's well-being depends on the well-being of the middle class. And the Biden administration and Senator Durbin and myself are going to make sure we continue to make investments in the middle class of this country. It also will make commutes safer, shorter, and more equitable in the process. But the work doesn't just stop here. Building Back Better means extending the CTA to reach even more of the South Side and to help connect thousands more Chicagoans to the rest of the city. It means investing in our transit systems to make all stations accessible. You know, we've come a long way, but our country is long overdue for comprehensive, bold infrastructure investments that boost our economy and helps our working families. Roads and bridges are critically important, but so are locks and dams. So is our wastewater and drinking water. Chicago has more lead pipelines than any other part of the country, exponentially more lead pipelines, service lines in the nation. So as we work on roads and bridges, we're going to work on water so that you can have safe drinking water. We're going to make sure that there is Wi-Fi across the country. We have 22 million families in this country that do not have Wi-Fi access. It's really hard for a child to get ahead if they can't do their homework. It's hard for Americans with disabilities to get ahead if they can't train to go to work. It is really difficult for all of us to succeed if we start leaving the others behind. So we can't ignore the challenges like these and expect that our nation and our economy to truly thrive. Thank you again, Mr. Secretary, for joining us all here today. I really look forward to continuing to work with you on all of these projects. I sit on all of the infrastructure committees, so that is an offer of help, not a threat. And with that, I am so pleased to announce Secretary Buttigieg, our U.S. Secretary of Transportation. Mr. Secretary. Try not to run over Bobby Rush in the process. They'll definitely lose votes that way.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Senator, for your leadership. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the committees that oversee my work, although it doesn't hurt. But it's also so admirable, and I want to applaud the work in particular that you've done on accessibility. As we marked one anniversary of the ADA, she's pointed out it shouldn't take until the 50th anniversary of the ADA to be able to say that a system is completely accessible. And that is part of the President's vision and the administration's vision as well. Senator Durbin, a member of the leadership in the Senate that is guiding this critically important bill toward passage. We can't wait for that vote for you and your colleagues to take. Mayor, it is a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for your leadership. It has never been more demanding or more difficult or more important to be a mayor in America, and your leadership is nationally recognized. And I appreciate, as a former mayor and as a very briefly former Chicagoan, the work that's going on here and the chance to see it firsthand. I want to thank all of the members of the House who were here. The House passed an extraordinary piece of infrastructure legislation, as well as that American Rescue Plan that's keeping operations like the CTA going. Representative Rush, thank you for the welcome to your district. Representative Garcia, I spoke to, really wanted to be here and was unable, but is here in spirit. Representative Newman, Representative Robin Kelly, Sean Caston, Congressman Quigley, Representative Foster, thank you for everything that you're doing. And I want to thank CTA President Dorval Carter for sharing this with us, and also for everybody you represent, the essential workers. And I know we've got a lot of union leadership here today, too, who didn't have a choice to work from home because lives depended and livelihoods depended on their coming to work every single day. And we are thankful for you, and we support you in this administration. I've been thinking about a little bit of a number that CTA President Carter shared with me, which is the amount of time it takes to get from Altgeld Gardens to downtown Chicago. The residents there, in order to get to a job, he shared with me, have to take an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, in order to be able to get to work, which coincidentally is about as much time as it takes, if you happen to have a car, to get from South Bend, Indiana, where I grew up, to the heart of Chicago in the Loop. We have a suburb or a community next to South Bend called Roseland, Indiana. And I love Roseland, Indiana, but it should not take longer to get to a job in the heart of Chicago from the Roseland community of Chicago than it does from the Roseland community in Indiana, 90 miles east of here. And this extension is going to change that. So that's just one example of why I'm so excited to be here. In an administration that is prioritizing safety, climate, jobs, equity, and a view to the future in our transportation policy, there's no better place to talk about infrastructure than Chicago. Infrastructure made Chicago because Chicago made infrastructure. And when around here they were proposing to do things like invent the floating foundation that makes it possible to have a skyscraper, or to take the river and basically make it roll uphill, I'm sure some people back then were wondering if that was so-called traditional infrastructure too. It may not have been traditional at the time, but it created the tradition that we now count on and that fuels an entire region. And we've got to support that with good policy. We've got to support the safety improvements that were represented by the modernization that has already largely been achieved by CTA here. And we were proud to support things like the 95th Street Station with Tiger grants in prior administrations out of the U.S. Department of Transportation. When we think about equity, both in terms of who has access to transit and transportation and who has access to the jobs that are created by new transit and transportation projects, we know we've got to do better, and that is part of the President's vision and part of this legislation. When it comes to climate, it doesn't have to be called a climate bill to be a climate bill, because transportation is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in the U.S. economy, which means every time we give somebody a choice to take quality, safe, effective public transit instead of having to drag 2 tons of metal with them to wherever they're going and park it somewhere, we are also benefiting the President's ambitious climate goals. It is a matter of all of these things taken together. That's why we're so excited about the bipartisan infrastructure framework that's going to create millions of good-paying American jobs, union jobs, I might add, and that represents the largest investment in public transit in the history of the United States. The largest investment, we're proud of that. The largest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak. The most we've done on roads and bridges in this city of extraordinary and memorable roads and bridges since the Eisenhower administration, and funding for safety, including reducing traffic fatalities that are on the rise right now in this country, and where we've seen a disturbing amount of racial disparity. So we have seen that Chicago understands all of these things. I also want to applaud the decision to move toward electric buses, including a vision to have every single one of the 1,800 buses in this city electric in the future, with help from the FTA's low and no emission grant program. So the point is, I know there's been a lot of talk about infrastructure in this country. I know that Infrastructure Week has come to be, as Representative Krishnamurthy, fellow member of the Complicated Surname Club, put it, is something that sometimes arouses snickers in Washington. But we have a chance to actually get it done and to deliver it right here to the south side of Chicago. And when we do, we're going to have a lot to be proud of. So I'm delighted to be here. I admire the work that's going on, and I think we have a little bit of time to take some questions.
Great. Bill Ruthart, the Chicago Tribune. Welcome back to Chicago, Mr. Secretary. From what I understand in this bipartisan package, specific projects are not necessarily laid out. It's up to the locals to work with the feds to fund those. But knowing what you've heard about the extension of the red line today, what would you assess the likelihood of this project getting funded if the legislation were to pass? And then to Mayor Lightfoot, if you could speak to the progress in the design and preparing to get ready for this project, which I know has been in the works for quite some time.
Yeah. So the federal support for a project like this would largely come from the Capital Investment Grants Program with the FTA. And this is exactly the kind of project that there would be more resources for if we got this bipartisan framework through. It's part of what we mean when we talk about that largest investment ever. So you're right, the bill's not built on a project-by-project basis, but these are the kinds of things we have in mind, especially as they bear on safety, equity, climate, and jobs all at the same time. There are other funding sources like discretionary grants that would also potentially come into play depending on congressional design, and that I know that President Carter and his colleagues would know how to go after in a convincing way. So safe to say there's a lot in it for Chicago in this proposed plan. And I'll step aside for the mayor to answer the question.
Well, I'm going to do what any smart mayor does, is I'm going to defer to the person who's actually a subject matter expert. Go ahead, Dorval, and take that question.
Thank you. As you may be aware, we have invested already a substantial amount of money in developing this project. It is well through the project development phase and is being well positioned to pursue the funding from the federal government in the next year or two. So I'm confident that we're going to be in a position to get the money. For those of you who know me know that I'm really good at getting money from the federal government, and this project is a top priority for me. So we're looking forward to working with the Secretary and getting the money that we need to make it happen.
And let me just add that, you know, one of the things that President Carter and I have talked about in our teams is we've got to make sure that we're working in partnership together. We've seen when you make investments and there's development, what happens if you're not thoughtful about the consequences of that development on the surrounding community. So we will be working in partnership. The city will also be investing its dollars alongside of the dollars that come to the CTA so that the communities of those 4 stops going to 130th Street really also benefit in the surrounding area with equitable transportation-oriented development, making sure that retail is there, streetscapes, and all the other things that are really going to enhance the investment of the red line. So it can't just be we're going to put dollars in to get the red line extended. We've got to think holistically about how we really make catalytic investments along that path, and we will. Other questions?
Yeah, Megan Dwyer with WGN-TV. Mr. Secretary, I'm curious if any part of this package speaks about high-speed rail or light rail. It's great to put money into dilapidated infrastructure, but anything toward the future here that could benefit Chicago?
Absolutely. As you know, we've got a lot of work to do just to shore up what we've got. So that's unquestionably part of what we would need to look for the rail funds for. But this is also about looking to the future. In this administration, I know that I can only ever be the second biggest passenger rail enthusiast, but I work hard to make it a close second. And like the president, and like so many Americans, I believe that we as a country shouldn't put up with being unable to access a level of rail service that people in most developed countries can take for granted. What does that actually look like? Well, in the context of the funding that we have, we think there would be enough to establish about 3 kind of showcase intercity high-speed rail corridors, as well as upgrading and improving some of what we already have, proving that the United States can in fact do high-speed rail as well or better than anyone, and creating a foundation for a future network that would continue to build on that.
Would Chicago be in one of those?
What's that? Again, we don't design this on a project-by-project basis, but let me say this. You know, some folks who are pessimistic about our rail potential, even though this country and certainly this region were built on rail, some people say, well, you know, the U.S. can't do it because we're not, you know, we don't have the same density as, you know, Europe, where they have great rail. And maybe as a country, we don't, but the Midwest sure does. It has some of the very same patterns in terms of cities. Imagine what it would mean if Chicago, and just to take some examples, if Chicago and Louisville and Toledo and Detroit and St. Louis and Minneapolis were all connected in city pairs that you could get across in about a couple of hours at a time. That vision, I think, is eminently possible in this country if we invest in it. And the beginning of that investment is contemplated not just in the president's vision, but what made it into that infrastructure framework too.
Thank you. Mayor, my second question is for you. Do you hope to have any of this money earmarked for updating how people get from our airports to the loop, so we don't just have Uber, taxi, or the train?
So we're working on plans now and having lots of conversations. Some of you know there are already lines that run from the Fulton Market area to O'Hare. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We've been, I think, in productive conversations with some of the stakeholders that we're going to need to make that project a reality. But we're working on that, and obviously any additional federal resources are going to be a bonus. But I think we've got resources here regionally that we could make that a reality, and we're well on our way to in those discussions. Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Sure. Kimberly Agoin of WVON 1690 AM, Talk of Chicago. We also have a Roseland here, so I hope you got an opportunity to see that. We just came off of a march to Washington, D.C. through 10 cities, and we stayed in Roseland talking about violence, which is something our mayor is working on extremely hard. But one of the questions that I have about that is, while we were there, there was a student that was killed on one of our transit lines here, very tragic situation. Department of Transportation, you say safe, effective, but we want to emphasize the safe piece. Yep. What is your role in ensuring that we can make sure that our transit is safe for all the people who have to take it? And the second part is, you've really stepped up and taken a big role in this violence issue. Are you also going to make sure that there are community members that are a part of all of these discussions, because that's very important?
Absolutely, yeah. These improvements and these changes and investments have to be something that is done with community members and never to community members. And it's one of the things I've been asking about on this visit, and have been so encouraged to hear about the intention that the CTA and other leaders here have brought to that. Look, safety is the #1 reason my department even exists. And I'm very much saddened to hear of another life lost on one of our transit systems. That can't happen, and we can't accept that. And whether we're talking about traffic fatalities, or whether we're talking about safety for somebody riding transit, or any of our other ways of getting around, we have to move toward a vision that says that 0 is the only acceptable number of deaths. It's not just the cost of doing business, it's not just how things work, it's something we can act on. In order to make good on that, good intentions won't be enough. We got to put dollars behind it. That's why there are billions committed specifically for safety in the infrastructure framework and in the vision that the president put forward. Sometimes that's about helping reach people about, especially on the driver's side, about unsafe behavior. Sometimes it's not about a choice that somebody's making, driving or riding. It's about the equipment itself or the design of the system. Sometimes there are issues related to violence and crime that I know the mayor and others have been putting so much work and intention into addressing here on the South Side and across Chicago, and it's so important across the country. All of these things fit together, and they're at the absolute core of a vision for a better transportation future in the country.
Jerry Riles, WCPT 820 AM. Mayor, this question is for you, and I want to piggyback off of the initial question that was asked. During the brief tour down here, at the 95th Street station. There was an African-American male, probably, 30s, 40s, and he continued to shout out or mention, what about the crime? What about the crime? Mm-hmm. And this is all good, obviously for media purposes and for the direction that we're going, but for those people in the community, black and brown people in particular, and you talk about going all the way out to Altgeld Gardens at 130th, mm-hmm. The violence that these gentlemen and people in the community experience every day, for them, this means nothing.
On-topic questions, sir. On-topic questions only.
The question is, for those people traveling from those communities down into the city, they're concerned about their welfare.
And I'm concerned about their welfare. I said this many times, and yesterday in particular, in addressing some of the violence that we've seen happen across our city this week. There are a lot of great things that are happening in Chicago. Our economy is coming roaring back. There's a lot of opportunity that we're creating, and we're here today talking about future opportunities, investment. But if people don't feel safe, nothing else matters. It is the priority, not one of many. It is the priority. And how do you get at that? You've got to do some things on the immediate front to quell the violence. You've heard me talk at length about the fact that we are awash in guns in the city. And again, I'm grateful for President Biden and his administration recognizing that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. The strike forces, which I hope that we'll be announcing, are here in our city next week. The additional resources to support ATF. But fundamentally, why is there so much violence in our city? Aside from the guns, it's because we have an absence of hope. We have disinvested in communities on the south and the west side for decades. Young men are growing up in this city feeling like their destiny is minding somebody's corner spot, an early death, or jail. Making these kinds of investments that we're talking about today, they're not irrelevant. They are part of the solution. And showing these communities that we care about them, that we care about their health and well-being, that we're creating opportunities to create good paying jobs and vibrancy, that is got to be part of the solution for the violence. We know how to do this. We just got to make sure that we block out all the noise and that we are singularly focused on improving the quality of life in communities in partnership with them. We come to them with, and you've heard me say this before, with a humble heart and a listening ear and extending our hand in partnership. And these investments have to be part of that calculus.
Hey, all, this last question.
Dan, you're back.
I think we're going to have a riot on our hands if we do that. We got a lot of folks here.
Wait a second. All right, thank you. Marianne Ahern from NBC. Nice to see you, Secretary. My question is, you had mentioned that earlier in April, you had thought that this bill would have been passed by Memorial Day. It didn't happen. So now what? And could I just also kind of include in that, if not when, and while you talked about high-speed rail, how about the good old South Shore from South Bend to Chicago? Where is that on that high-speed rail plan?
Well, I'll tell you, I used to get on the South Shore and make my way to NBC5 as an intern about 20 years ago. So obviously something I know well, is close to my heart, and is one more example of how we've got Amtrak and the National Rail Network. We've also got a lot of other, sometimes state-supported, sometimes regionally supported passenger rail. They would be eligible for what are called Prime Grants, which is a new program that we're proposing in the President's budget, and would be eligible for some of the other funds that are contemplated in that bigger bucket of passenger rail. And as far as timeline, let me say this. This, certainly by Washington standards, is warp speed. To see something 6 months into the administration even being here, this close to getting a vote on the Senate, reflects an extraordinary amount of work. I'll tell you, our team has rendered technical assistance that would typically be done over a period of about 18 months and are sometimes given about 18 hours to do it, as we're working to make sure all the pieces are in place. There will be more twists and turns. There's no question of that. And obviously, much of this depends on the processes of the House and the Senate, respectively. But what we know is the public is impatient, the President is impatient, and I think there's bipartisan will to get this done, and the sooner we do, the sooner our department can turn its attention to actually getting those resources out to places like this where they can do a lot of good.
I took my turn back. Mr. Secretary, this may be for you, maybe it's for the mayor, but another high-speed rail question. over the last 25, 30 years, we've heard a lot of talk and people pushing for high-speed rail. It's a subject of the day, and then it disappears. It's a priority of the month, it disappears. So what makes it different this time?
Well, seeing is believing. It will be different when you actually have passengers having that experience. Now, on our Northeast corridor, we have the highest speed rail now in the U.S., and it's already reached the point where passengers will often prefer, even pay a little extra to take the train rather than to fly on the same route between, say, D.C. and New York. But I don't see why that just has to be an East Coast thing. Again, the Midwest is one of the areas that stands to benefit the most. And so being able to have more city pairs with that kind of high-speed connection, something we could move toward with these dollars, I think will make all the difference for people to stop thinking of high-speed as maybe something that's only really possible for the U.S. Northeast, or only really something you can do in Germany or Japan. And by the way, it's not just Germany and Japan. It is Morocco or Spain, a whole lot of other places where people can take this for granted. Americans should be able to count on it too.
Mr. Secretary, you made mention of the fact that there's been some pushback on the so-called non-traditional infrastructure elements in this bill. Are you confident you can overcome those political hurdles and keep things like broadband in the final deal?
I think so, because it was in the bipartisan infrastructure framework. I mean, when was the last time in today's Washington that we saw a Democratic president walking out of the White House with a group of Republican and Democratic senators at his side saying, we have a deal? It wasn't everything that we think is important, which is why, as you know, we're also pursuing the bigger Build Back Better agenda. And some of those things may not get Republican votes, although I think they should. I don't see why a Republican can't vote for everybody to have paid family leave. As a matter of fact, during that early period when we first rolled out the first version of the bill, a lot of times what we heard from our Republican friends was, oh no, I'm all for housing or veterans infrastructure or child care. I just don't think it's infrastructure, so you should put it in a different package. Well, now it's in a different package, so let's see if they can vote for it now. We hope they do, but if it has to be done with Democratic votes, the president's prepared to move forward on that basis for that side of the vision.
I'm not sure if this is for the mayor or Mr. Carter. Can you talk about how the money in this plan, if it's passed, would affect the timeline for the Red Line Extension project? Would it allow for the city to maybe push up its timeline instead of opening in 2029, maybe 2025 or so? And then also for the secretary, as a former Chicagoan, can you talk a little bit about, while you were here, what mode of transportation you used, and also while you were here, what was needed, from the transportation from the city during your time?
Yeah, I think to your first question, in order for the project to happen, there needs to be money sort of at the end of the road to fund it. So getting this bill passed allows me to ultimately establish a firm timeline for when we think the project can move forward. Not having that bill passed means that there will still be a piece of the funding puzzle that I won't know the answer to until funds are available to make that happen. So from my perspective, what it does is it gives certainty to the ability to move the project forward, and that by its very nature means the project can move forward faster.
When I was living here, it would have been about 2008, and like a lot of Chicagoans, the bus or CTA were a big part of my life. But even in just the decade or so since then, I would have dreamed of being able to have widely available city-supported bike share the way there now is. To see bus rapid transit, which was considered pretty newfangled in that decade, but is now a very important part of how people move around the loop and helps to reduce congestion. To see some of the other improvements, like what we've seen today in the modernization that's gone into this 95th Street station, it shows the progress that can be made with the right kind of I was going to say patience, but really the right kind of impatience to get things done and do them quickly. What we need to do, though, is supercharge that with the right support from Washington and the kind of federal dollars that could allow every community, including Chicago, to do so much more.
My question is to the mayor. With all the improvements that's going on with public transportation here, will the riders have to pay more to ride?
Great question. I'll start and then I'm going to pitch to President Carter. Look, the one thing that we know, and particularly as we're thinking about making investments on the South Side, affordability is key. There are other opportunities for transit on the South Side. Why are they not used? They're not used because of affordability issues. So keeping transit affordable is a key priority for me, I know for President Carter, and frankly our friends in organized labor as well. It doesn't make any sense for us to make these investments if people can't afford to ride them. So we're always going to be focused on that question. And Dorval, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No. The mayor said it as well as I did.
Mr. Secretary, just a question for you. I know that all the projects have to first come to be brought to you, but what is your commitment to, and what are you telling these elected leaders here about what the Biden administration's commitment is going to be to Chicago and this region with investments to make things actually happen?
Well, I'm not here just to talk about what's going to happen. We're doing it right now. Matter of fact, in our recent round of infra grants, discretionary grants that I recently signed off on the proposed funding for, we had support for projects in this region that are going to make a difference. But I guess what we're saying is there could be so much more if we invested at the level that a country ought to if it wants to stay the leading country in the world. We are no longer in the top 10. As a country. And it was interesting hearing about the two report cards, both of them valid, right? One from CNBC emphasizing how well Illinois has done relative to a lot of its peers within the United States, but another one from the civil engineers warning us, and by the way, the country as a whole is in kind of D's and C's territory, relative to what it really could be and should be. We are now 13th place in the world. In a country that is where it is in the lead among the economies of the world, largely because we committed to infrastructure generations ago. We are still coasting off of those decisions. There is no question that one of the most important and significant and economically generative regions in the country will see a major share of the infrastructure framework that we're hoping will get a vote in the Senate as early as next week.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it.
There's one more. Sorry. Here, let's get to a microphone.
Mr. Secretary, I'd like to ask you a question a little off topic, and that is the President last week issued an executive order broad on increasing competition in many industries. Yep. The one that your department will oversee is the airlines, and I'm wondering if you could explain why, particularly at this time when the airlines have struggled so much during the pandemic, you see a need for a crackdown on excessive fees and increasing competition, particularly among the big hub and spoke network carriers?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. We stand with the aviation sector and the extraordinary employees of that sector who have been through so much, and it's one of the reasons why such a major level of support to keep those people in their jobs and to keep that sector doing well was part of the American Rescue Plan. We did everything to support the aviation sector, and we'll continue to do that. But it has to be playing by the rules and operating on a fair basis. And if you get charged a baggage fee and then you have a crazy delay in whether the bags even get there, if you pay for Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi doesn't work, you got to get your money back. It's a basic principle of customer service, and the President believes, and I believe, that it's very important we hold that up. So we're talking about that, or the recommendations for surface transportation to make sure that our rail sector stays competitive, or the things that need to happen on the port side and the maritime side to keep our supply chains moving smoothly. The economy only works if it's working on a competitive basis, and we have to pay extra attention when you have a sector where there's a lot of consolidation and just a few major players to make sure that everything continues to work, ultimately for the benefit of the American consumer.
Have the airlines been consolidated too much market control?
Well, evaluating mergers obviously falls to the Department of Justice, and they take a close look at these things. But what we'll say is, when we see evidence of a concern, and we certainly have gotten a lot of inbound about this issue of fees and charges, we're going to work to make sure that everything that happens is fair, and that there's no negative impact to consumers. Again, if you pay a fee for something, you ought to get it. And if you don't get it, you ought to get your money back. It's a common sense principle, and we've got to make sure, no matter how many or how few carriers there are, that principle is being upheld.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.